There we go. So over to you, Liz and Lou from Heart of England Community Foundation.
Hello, I'll start and introduce myself, and I'll tell you how it's going to go briefly before I go on to Lou. So my name is Liz. I've been working for the Heart of England as a grants officer for about 3 years, but I've been working in funding for about 25. I've worked for lots of major organisations like the National Lottery, community funding, senior positions. I also have done lots of bid writing, capacity building for smaller organisations. I've run a small charity. So I've been on all sides of the fence. It's a three-way fence in my case. And what we're going to do today is, well, it seems like more of a one-to-one than an actual group thing, but what we want to do is tell you how to apply to the Heart of England, the sort of things that you'll need, and then we're going to go into a lot of depth about our Made by Sport programme. And I'll ask Lou to introduce herself before I go any further.
Okay, thanks Liz. Morning, I'm Lou Beddoe. I'm also a grants officer at Heart of England Community Foundation. I've been with the foundation since October 19, so about 18 months. Prior to that, I actually worked in infrastructure support, so a similar role as Carver do, supporting the voluntary and community sector with anything and everything they need support with, including safeguarding, funding, training, all of those sort of things. So I bring sort of the Heart of England Foundation knowledge really around grassroots organisations and the kind of activities that they deliver out in the sector. Yeah, so I've been mostly involved with the Made by Sport applications and assessing of those, so I will lead on that particular element of the session today.
Okay, thank you, Lou. And I'm just going to share my screen and our presentation, and then we'll get started on that. And I'll start off by telling you what the ground rules are. Right. Can everybody see the screen okay? Yep.
Yes.
That's always a very good start. Right, so a few ground rules first of all. But we're getting a lot better at doing these than we were 16 months ago. I must apologise that the laptop I have, which is a new laptop, but because we're a charity, obviously it's an old laptop, it's really slow. And I'm not quite sure how it's going to work on this today, but can you make sure you're on mute? There aren't that many of us, so it's not as important as usual, but it's still helpful. If you have any questions, use the chat button in the first instance, and then either Lou or myself will pick that up. And then I think the presentation we've said is being recorded, it's going to be shared. And we'll be looking in a little while at our website, the heartofengland.co.uk website. So it's useful if you have that open to look at while I'm talking through it. In terms of the running order, I'm just going to talk a little bit about Heart of England Community Foundation, tell you what our basic rules are in terms of applying, and then we'll go into the detail of the Made by Sport programme. If we have time and people are interested, then we might refer to other open programmes we have at the moment and possibly give you some top tips on writing applications to us. But we'll see how the music goes, how the whole thing goes, and what it is you're particularly interested in. Okay, so I don't know if either of you, Gareth or Andy, have applied to Heart of England Community Foundation before, but we're a charity in ourselves. Community foundations were established around 30 years ago in the UK. It was an idea that came from America, where they're really big on philanthropy, and it was designed particularly to fund grassroots activity. And there are something like 40 or 50 community foundations across the whole of the country. And when each was set up, the government gave them an initial sum of money to provide an endowment that then could generate interest. And it was out of that they paid grants. And we fund activity right across the West Midlands and Warwickshire. So a really, really big patch. We usually have, I don't know, somewhere up to around £1.5 million a year to distribute. The last 18 months have been fairly exceptional for us, as you might imagine, and I think we're near at about 3 for the last year. But as well as the endowment that I refer to, what we call our own money, most of our money that we distribute comes from donors. And these can be individual donors like family trusts, small family trusts, or they can be corporate donors. Our biggest corporate donor is the Wesleyan Assurance Foundation, and they give us up to £1 million a year to distribute more widely across the UK. So that's important because it means that we offer lots of different programs because we have lots of different donors and they have lots and lots of different interests. So like Made by Sport is a sporting program, but we're also supporting Coventry 2021 with arts-based activities. So it means we can be a bit of a one-stop shop. The really important thing is that, as I said earlier, it's meant to be about grassroots activities. So the majority of our grants are quite small. £2,000 is about the average, and it's meant to be small local groups. We're not here to fund the big nationals, which isn't something that happens so much anymore. Right, I mentioned earlier I'll be looking at our website. And I'm going to go to that in a minute. So if you could have it open, because when people want to apply for funding, the first thing they tend to do is look for an application form. And it's really important that you get some background as to what's needed to succeed before you do that. So I'll try and encourage people to do that. Right. So our very basic requirements. I mean, do you want to tell me, Gareth and Andy, have you applied for much funding in the past?
No. I didn't know it was a thing.
Oh gosh, this is a whole new world today.
Indeed, indeed.
Well, I really hope that it's the start of something for you. That's amazing. All right. Now, every funder that you go to has a set of basic requirements, eligibility requirements, it's called, things that you have to have before you can get off the starting blocks. You see the way I'm using sporting metaphors today? And for us, we try and keep it as simple as we can. But for an organisation, I'm going to start at the bottom of my screen and not the top, but the first thing that you need to have is a constitution or a governing document. Which can be very, very basic, but you need to be set up formally in some way. And this is for your protection as much as anything else. So you need to have a constitution that tells you, that says who you are. It says what you're there to do, which for us has to be something that brings a benefit to the community in some way. There have to be at least 3 of you that are running the organisation. So usually you have something like, it could be a chair, a treasurer or a secretary. And that's for safety as well, 3 unrelated members of your management committee. And also because that's really the minimum that you can get away with to be able to run effectively, you know, without somebody being totally overwhelmed. In your governing document, so you need your 3 trustees. We'll expect you all to say something about how often you'll meet, when you're going to have like an annual general meeting, how you actually make yourself accountable to the rest of the community. We'll need to know something about how you're going to run your finances. There should be something in there saying you'll draw it up, you'll report it to you know, your monthly meetings or bi-monthly meetings or whatever. It'll be signed off by such and such. And also really, really important, the other thing that you need is what we call a dissolution clause. So if you fold, what happens to any money that's left? For us, you must have something in there that says, if you fold, then the money will go to another charitable organisation. Now, when I go onto our website, if you look on there, it gives you this information, and you can go to Carver, of course. It will help you if you need to draw up a governing document, or you want to make sure that everything that should be in there is in there. The next thing that we'll need to see is a full set of financial accounts, but I don't want people to think that what we're saying is you have to have something produced that would be suitable for a major organisation. If you're a very small organisation, we're quite happy just to see a summary of your income and expenditure for the year. And lots of groups only provide this. You have to have a reasonably high income level before you have to get more specialists than that if you're an unincorporated group. So we need to know what you're getting in every year and what you're spending every year and what's left at the end of the year. We call that your free reserves, the money that you can do anything you like with. If you're a new organisation, what we like you to provide is a forecast of the money that you're going to have coming in and the money that you think you're going to have going out. Very straightforward. And the next really important thing that we need to see is your policies. And we expect all organisations, no matter how small they are, to have 2 policies at least, one of which will be an equalities policy and the other a safeguarding policy. And when I go onto the website, I'll show you a bit where it tells you what you need to have in there, because they have to be set up in a very particular way. And most importantly, you have to have policies that you're following, and we might talk to you about how it works in your organisation. And safeguarding for this programme in particular is so very, very important, because essentially it's about working with children. And you must also be reviewing your policies very, very regularly. So those are the things that we need. I just want to go back to the website. I'm going to stop sharing this. Have you got any questions so far on what I've said? Because it's a really good forum now with so few of us to discuss that in more detail. Or is it a bit overwhelming?
No, that's fine. I've got all that stuff. So
that's a really good start then. Fantastic. Okay, right. I'm just going to go onto our website and show you the pages that are important in there before we go over to Lou to talk about MBS. Oh, sorry. Right, where's it gone? Here it is. Okay, so this is our website. As you can see, I think, right, you can see at the top, this comes up as a banner on every page that you go into. Sign up to our newsletter. And the first thing that we advise you to do is do just that, sign up to the newsletter, because as I said earlier, we manage a number of different funds, and the funds that we manage almost literally change from month to month. I think we've got 3 or 4 that are being negotiated at the moment. So keep up to date with what's coming so that you can be one of the first to apply. Find out what's there and you can be one of the first to apply. I think at the moment we've got something like 14 or 15 open programs, something like that. So there's always a lot going on. Right, so you do that, and then when you've done that, what everybody wants to do is look at the available grants and apply to them. But before you do that, please look at these 2 portions here, support for applicants and essential information, because they have some really, really good bits and pieces in there. Oh, there we go. Right, okay, so under essential information, we've got a number of really what are our most frequently asked questions. Can individuals apply? What type of organisations can apply? Oh, okay, if you just click on the side, it tells you there's some of the information that I've just been through. Oh, and one little bit here. If you apply for capital items, you need to apply for quotations over £300. That's perhaps the most frequent reason why we have to go back to people who've applied to us, which, you know, takes up more of your time, and it's probably already taken you a lot of your free time to do the form, and obviously it slows down the processing of the application. Oh, on that point, processing of applications, we say, I think at the moment our advice is between 8 and 12 weeks, Lou, to process an application? Or you're on mute.
Wouldn't unmute then, sorry, 8 and 10, between 8 and 10 weeks, yeah.
Fantastic, a little bit faster than I thought.
Mhm.
So do bear that in mind whenever you're putting an application together. I think Made by Sport is slightly different, but it's still going to be a good 4 to 6 weeks at least. Right, okay. Different sorts of organisations. Right, for most of our programmes, the size of income is below £250,000, though it's for some it's around 500, which I know doesn't sound as if it's very much grassroots. But the thing is that when organisations with smaller incomes apply, then they tend to be given more of a priority than the larger organisations, if it's a good application. Right. Some of the others, what I want to go down to, right, when I talked earlier about the safeguarding policy and the equalities policy, this tells you exactly what we're looking to see in your policy. So those are the bits that you should be looking for. And I think we've actually got some online references. Yeah, it tells you to go to the NSPCC site and have a look there. But the most frequent reason for a policy not coming up to our requirements is that it's not reviewed. So it's set up. I had one yesterday that was done in 2014 and it hadn't been reviewed since. And lots have changed, both in terms of safeguarding practice and equality and diversity practice since then. So although in itself it was a reasonable document, the question it raises in your mind is, what is the practice like internally if they haven't looked at this for so very long? Okay, project costs, I'm just really quickly, whoops. We require a detailed breakdown of costs. When we're going through the application form, not so much for this one, we've got categories for the budget, you know, capital costs, excuse me, staffing costs, operational costs. But the other most frequent problem that we have is that people are very, very general in their project costs. So for instance, if you're running activities and we're talking about venue hire, well, we're wanting to know how much is an hour and how many sessions that you're running. If you're asking for staff costs, then it's about how many hours a week, what the hourly rate is, volunteer costs. We quite often get very general figures for volunteers, and the question we get again and again at panels is how have they worked that out? So what they don't want to see is the possibility that you're just going to give £5 a day to volunteers, because that gives you difficulties with HMRC, in that that's then seen as a benefit rather than a volunteer cost. But it needs to be reflecting that what you're looking to do is to pay actual volunteer costs, though the figure you come up with can be based on what you know historically that people have. Does that make sense? I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good. And then the other bit that I just wanted to go into really quickly before Lou goes on is support for applicants. Right, and there's a number of really good little documents in here that have been put together, mainly by grant staff. So we've got more frequently asked questions. We've got a little form that talks about completing the application form. A webinar on what makes a good application, a jargon buster. So all of these are just worth looking at, because as I say, often they've either been put together by grant officers themselves who assess applications, or they've been put together by applicants who've been successful. So it's very much based in reality. So I would really recommend, whatever it is that you're applying for and how often you do it, that you go into both of those to ensure that you've got the correct information and that you've got as much sort of help and support as we can give you. Okay, so that's my bit. And now Lou is going to talk to you about MBS.
Thanks, Liz. Bear with me a second while I try and share a screen. Right, can you see a fun fact sheet?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Right, right, thank you. Right, I think you've said that you haven't applied to us before, but what we wanted to do was go through the fun fact sheet for the Made by Sport programme, because as a national programme, that means that it's not just the Heart of England Community Foundation that are delivering this. A lot of community foundations across the country are also involved in offering this as a fund. It's we didn't have much involvement in the actual creation of the fund fact sheet and the application form, so what we wanted to go through it today, because had we have had some involvement, we would have made some tweaks to make it a little bit more simpler for people to understand, because it's quite long. There's a lot of sort of repeated questions and things, so that's what I'll be doing now, is to go through the fund fact sheet first, and then look at the actual application form. And then I've got a couple of examples of applications that we've received. Obviously they've been anonymised, but we've received applications and both were funded, but they're both delivering sport in different ways. So just to show you two examples of the kind of things that the panel are looking for. As Liz has said, myself, Liz and our other colleague Jenny, the 3 grants officers here at Heart of England, we may make recommendations about applications, but we don't make the decisions. It actually goes to a panel who make decisions. For the Made by Sport programme, although our turnaround time is 8 to 10 weeks, the Made by Sport currently meet monthly. So hopefully you would hear quite quickly, around about a month to 5 weeks for notification of whether you've been successful or not. So it's quite a quick turnaround, which is great. It means you won't have to wait too long agonising as to whether you've been successful or not. So just to go through the fund fact sheet, I'll read through. I won't read through the whole fund fact sheet. As you can see, it is quite a long document, but we did want to, as I say, look at it today just to pick out the key things that we're looking for when you apply to us, really, to help you sort of apply and not worry about certain sections so much, to just get sort of an application into us. So if you haven't looked at the programme already or had a quick look at it, the funding is primarily for young people aged 5 to 25. That's not to say that your club or organisation can't work with people outside of that area. You know, we've had applications from people who, particularly say football clubs, where they've got numerous teams. They've got a youth team of under 7s, and then they've got adult teams as well. But this fund will only fund projects that benefit young children and young people aged 5 to 25. But as I say, that's not to say you can't apply if you've got sort of other age ranges, but you must be able to evidence within your application that this fund is specifically ring fenced. It will only benefit 5 to 25. That's one of the main criteria that they're very tight on. As you can see in the line underneath, it says that they'll give priority to organisations that have less than 10% of their membership outside of this age range. So it's important for you to evidence, although you may have older people involved with your club or organisation, this fund will only benefit 5 to 25-year-olds.
And it's important to say that that's a priority. You'll see a lot on application forms about what are absolute rules that cannot be changed, and what, if there are too many applications, what are going to be the priority for panels. So if you don't fit that priority, it doesn't mean that you won't be funded. It just means if there are too many applications to fund, then those that do have that priority, so they have less than 10% of their membership outside of this age range, will be the ones that get funded first of all. Lou, do you mind if I just go back to the top of the fund fact sheet?
Yeah.
we have, for every single program that we run, we have a fund fact sheet. And the first thing generally in the fund fact sheet, it tells you what the program is there to do. So for Made by Sport, it's for sports club or organisations which intentionally use sport to deliver wider social outcomes for young people and are able to demonstrate that COVID has adversely affected them. So that's the important thing here. Lots of people always come to us and say, will you fund me to do such and such? And I have to say, it depends which program you're looking at, and it depends on the aims of the program. And that's really important. When you're thinking about what you want to do, you have to think of it in the context of the aims. So does what you do or want to do intentionally use sport to deliver wider social outcomes for young people? What you're doing in some ways is irrelevant. It's whether or not it fits within that. Do you think that's fair, Lou?
Yeah, I think it's important to say as well, because as I say, it's a national programme, and we are feeding back to them some of the feedback we're getting from applicants that have been rejected, or us as grants officers, our own feeling about it. There has been an amendment now. I'll go into more detail about the wider social outcomes. They were only originally Made by Sport interested in applications where you were using sport to intentionally address wider social outcomes, and that sounds like a complete mouthful. So what we're going to try and do this morning is, what does that actually mean in reality? They have adapted that now, so it doesn't have to be an intentional use of sport. I'll just give you a quick example. There's children and young people hanging around on street corners, getting up to no good. You decide to deliver football sessions to address that, to reduce antisocial behaviour. So you've used sport intentionally then to stop kids hanging about and reducing antisocial behaviour. But on the flip of that now, Made by Sport will accept applications where you're a football club, you run football sessions, the children and young people play in leagues. So the main drive for your club is football and getting higher up in the league and improving your football skills. But unintentionally, by extension to that, you are improving the kids' mental health, because obviously being involved in physical activity, it can have an impact on their mental well-being as well. So originally it was just, we would only accept applications where it's intentional, whereas now they'll accept it where it's unintentional. Hopefully when I show you the two examples at the end, that will make it a little bit clearer, because this unintentional and intentional has confused a lot of people. We get a lot of sort of calls to clarify that. So hopefully by the end of the session today, it will be a little bit clearer. Going down the fact sheet again now. So when I was just talking then about this wider social outcomes, these are the 5 that the fund are looking for you to evidence within your application that you're achieving somehow. So, you know, I'm not going to read them all, but for example, improving mental health, as I've just said, that through the football activity and being engaged in physical activity, it's improving the children and young people's mental well-being as well. And they're reducing crime and antisocial behaviour. Excuse me, a little tickle in my throat. You've been reducing the crime and antisocial behaviour by engaging those kids hanging around on streets in football sessions. So those, it's not necessarily about evidencing the sport and the sport that you do, it's about evidencing the sport that you do with children and young people, how it impacts on these 5, one of these 5 social outcomes, or more than one. You will be asked to give what you think your main priority is. So some people will say, oh, it's developing life skills, but then they'll also say it also improves their mental well-being as well. So it's important to pick out which you think is your strongest outcome, but also mention that we do X, Y, and Z as well. You know, we do improve mental health, and we do work with addressing crime and antisocial behaviour as well. So it's like twofold in terms of the wider social outcomes. Most of our fund fact sheets are the same. So in terms of, like Liz said, sort of the main priority for the fund, the purpose, available funding is the next bit down. £2,021 is the maximum award that you can go for. Not sure where that came from. I think it's just a quirky number because we're in 2021. So you can apply for a grant of up to £2,021. Funds to be spent by November 2021, so the end of October, that funds need to be spent by. However, again, as part of our feedback to Made by Sport, they're looking to extend that. So if you think that your project's going to go beyond that, or what you need the funds for, still apply. We can have a conversation with you, because chances are that is going to be, we're 90% certain that deadline is going to be extended. We'll update our website to reflect that once we know. But just if you think that your project isn't going to be done by then, please still do apply, or give us a call before applying, because it is quite a long form actually. So we can, sort of discuss it with you as to whether it's worth applying or not. But my feeling is it is, because it will be extended. 90% guaranteed it's going to be extended. Again, these are sort of examples of what you can spend the funds on. So we get a lot of requests for direct project costs, including kit. So that's for staff costs to run the sessions, or volunteer expenses. Kit, I always talk about football. We do get a lot of applications for football that's included extra cones and bibs and footballs and all of those kind of things, because they want to run additional sessions to engage more children. So again, the staff costs, appropriately portioned core costs. So some of your costs that go like a contribution towards administrative or any kind of overheads that you encounter, but only a proportion of this particular programme. So sort of 10% of your core costs, for example. As I said, volunteer expenses, transport. So if you need to be some people have applied to collect young people to engage in activities. So the transport costs there have covered the mileage for the local minibus or volunteers' cars. Again, we're interested in if you're going to use it to sort of match fund or leverage for a larger grant. So for example, if you're looking to apply for a large grant, you can say we've already secured £2,021 from the Made by Sport project towards this larger project. It can help add weight to your application for a larger amount. Priority areas, as Liz said earlier, this is our patch. So Birmingham, Black Country, Coventry, Solihull and Warwickshire. So it's available to the whole of our region. Here we've had an awful lot of applications where people have been rejected, possibly because they've applied to us before. And as Liz said earlier, most of our programmes are around £250,000 annual income is sort of a benchmark. So people have applied and been rejected because for this programme, the maximum income is up to £75,000. I think the Made by Sport programme particularly wanted to target the grassroots sports and organisations delivering sport. So the smaller clubs and organisations out there, which is a good thing, but people have come unstuck with that £75,000 annual income. Again, within that, I mean, this sort of evidence is a little bit wider, that they're interested in the smaller clubs, because they'll give highest priority for up to 25,000. So they'll get first dibs of the money, and if there's too many applications, as Liz said, you'll take priority if you're below 25,000 or up to £25,000 income, and the lowest priority is up to the £75,000 income. As I say, we do get applications, lots of applications that are rejected on that basis. So I think, like Liz mentioned at the start, to look at the essential information and read the fact sheets. It's a good use of your time to grab a coffee and spend half an hour looking at it, because when we go through the application form shortly, you'll see there's an awful lot of work that goes into it, and it's awful for us as grants officers to have to reject, knowing that you've spent maybe a day getting the information to complete it based on the income's too high, or you just don't meet other criteria. So please do read this fact sheet. Again, you can apply if you're any of these, so registered charity, constituted community groups. As I said earlier, I think this is where they're sort of focusing in terms of their income levels. prioritise. Here, this section here where it says we're unable to fund, so they're saying where you're not intentionally, as I say, this we've fed that back to get this updated, because you can apply if the wider social outcomes are not your main drive, the football is your main drive, but by extension you make a difference to kids' mental well-being. So that bit there I'm not going to talk about, because that actually needs to be removed. The additional support and information is what Liz went through at the start. There's two parts to assessing of applications on any of our programmes. When people apply to us, the first thing that we'll do is look at your sort of supporting paperwork, really. So it's pointless applying with a great project, you know, really well written application with a perfect budget. You haven't got the supporting information in place. So yeah, people do come unstuck with that as well. So to spend some time to make sure your policies are up to date, and you have got, you know, the constituted document. Obviously Carver will be able to give you some pointers about that if you've got some bits missing. But if you apply and any of these are missing, we will write to you and ask for them. And if you reply and say, well, we haven't got that, we wouldn't be able to assess your application to take it forward for panel. What we would do is give you some suggestions of where you could get that from. Like I've said, you could go to Carver for advice about that. And what I tend to do, and I'm sure Liz would as well, is sometimes we'll give people time to work that out. So we won't reject it at that stage. We'll give you another month maybe to make sure your policy's in place. And if you come back to us and say we're still struggling, it's about keeping us in the loop, really. We don't want to reject people while you're still trying to sort things out. So if you're doing your best to sort it out, we will. So we'll put your application on hold. We won't reject it just yet. Just let us know.
And sorry, generally, that's always our approach. We're not here to let you fail, and especially over what we call our due diligence, your basic requirements. And it's for the good of you if you can get yourself to sort of that standard, because as I said earlier, it's not just us that will ask you for this, it's every other funder practically that you'll go to. So to get yourself well set up is really establishing yourself in terms of funding for the future. But we are here, if we can, to help you succeed. And the other bit of that is, I think we say again and again, if you're in doubt, just send us a message and somebody will get back to you. If you're not sure about whether or not a programme is for you, send a message to us. You used to phone us, but now it's sending a message, and somebody will get back and chat it through with you.
Yeah, thanks, Liz. Yeah, I think that is important, because we do try. We don't want to reject people, so we do offer, guidance and support. And exactly as Liz said, if you're not sure, give us a quick call. I think sometimes people are reluctant to do that, for lots of different reasons. But we're not here to sort of, if we give you a call back to explore it, it's not to make a decision as to whether you'll be funded or not, by something that you've said. That's not our aim when we speak to you, either, whether it's via email, a quick question, or we'll give you a call back if you want a little bit more advice. Is to point you in the right direction. We can't give you too much information as to what to put in your application, but we can give you a steer as to whether we think that's the right approach or not. As Liz said, we're here. We want people to secure the funding, so we're here to help people with that as best we can, really. So yeah, if you haven't got any of the supporting paperwork, I appreciate there's a lot. As Liz has said, if you go to any funder, chances are they'll ask for all of these, or the majority at least. And it's also good practice to have them in place for your club or organisation anyway. The last little bit here is around the sport for development. We've already sort of covered that. Is it looking at the wider social outcomes immediately or not? So I won't go through that bit there. It does give you some examples though, as to the kind of things that each of the 5 headings of the wider social outcomes you might be doing, and you might not realise you're doing them. You know, sport is your main drive. You know, by extension, if once you look at this, you think, oh, actually, yeah, we do encourage positive social interaction. You know, in the developing life skills in sport, there's communication, there's teamwork, all of those things all come under, you know, developing life skills, because they're transferable into everyday life for the kids that you're engaging with. So that's the fact sheet. I'm just going to have a quick look at some questions. No, I think they're older ones, just a bit behind with the chat. So is there any questions about the actual fact sheet? I appreciate it's an awful lot of information, but is there any questions about the fact sheet before we have a quick look at the application form?
No, I think that's really useful, actually. When we've applied before, I haven't had that much detail, and it would really help. I'm still not sure whether ours would fit, but I think I probably need to call, you know, it's best if I call you about it, I think.
Yeah, as Liz has said, because we're mostly still remotely working, obviously working from home, as a lot of the world still is, the best way at the moment is to probably drop us an email.
That's fine.
And then, give your number and it'll be passed on to one of us. If it was particularly this application or the Made by Sport programme you were looking at, it'd probably be passed on to me, because I've been involved with it. I can give you a call and we can chat it through.
Will your emails be provided at some point? Because I missed the beginning of the call.
I think they were on at the start of the presentation, weren't they, Liz? Or at the end? I mean, the main one is info@heartofenglandcf.co.uk.
Fine, that's perfect.
Yeah, I'm Lou at heartofenglandcf.co.uk. So, you know, that's my direct email address. Yeah, if you go through the info, it's normally passed on to the most appropriate person regarding the question.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, normally always we'll give you a call if you want us to. Well, we will if you want us to explore it a bit further. Okay, so any more questions about the fact sheet? No? Okay, let me try and share another one now. Right, can you see the application form now? Yeah, great.
Yes,
Okay.
I can. Yes.
Brilliant, thank you. Right. The Made by Sport, as I say, it's a programme, a national programme. The application form was put together by other people. So we did try and offer some feedback in terms of some of the questions and how they're worded, because they can be quite confusing. And as I've said earlier, you're feeding all of this back. At the moment, as we sit here and speak, there is a meeting going on with the provider as to all of the feedback from across all of the community foundations in terms of some of the questions and the criteria, whether the fund's going to be extended. All of those kind of things are happening as we speak. But at the moment, this is the form that if you applied today or tomorrow, you're likely to have to complete. So we wanted to go through it because we don't want people to sit there and think, what on earth does that mean? What do they want us to put in that box? So the purpose of going through the form, don't be too daunted by it. We want people to apply. We want people to put the best, the best information they can as a starting point, submit the application, and then we'll work with you to unpick it if there's any gaps or any queries. So the form is a long form, but please don't be put off by it. A lot of it is tick box, but there are about 5 questions where you will be expected to put a significant amount of words in. So those are the boxes that we'll concentrate on as to what on earth are we putting in those boxes. So most of our forms start with a similar section, looking at sort of our privacy policy, our data protection. You have to tick so that you understand those, that once you submit your application, you agree to these terms. enter your email address there. Put the boxes that have got a red line on are compulsory, mandatory. So if when you come to submit and there's an error, it's usually because particularly one of the boxes with a red mark on hasn't been completed or hasn't been ticked. So, you know, for example, the name of your organisation, if you haven't completed that, you won't be able to submit your application. Pretty straightforward, the name and address of your organisation or club. Some people obviously put their home address in there if there isn't actually a specific venue that you own. You know, if your sports club plays at a regular pitch, then you may put that address, but overall, particularly for more volunteer-led organisation, you know, volunteer-led groups, it would possibly be your home address there, you know, anywhere that you want any sort of information to go to. If you can include your website, if you've got one, that's great too. We have to have a contact person, so it's obviously in red. The work or office phone number there isn't a mandatory one, but we do encourage you, if you can, to number that you're happy to share with us, because if, as I say, that this panel meets monthly, so you know sometimes there's a tight turnaround if we don't give out panel dates or panel dates. But if you applied, you know, 3 or 4 days before a panel was due to meet, we want your application to get to that panel. We might give you a call if there's a couple of questions rather than email. So if you can put a phone number, that's great, because as I say, we do want people to get the money, and if you can get it, you know, within a few days of applying, by us giving you a quick call, then we'd rather do that than you have to wait sort of, you know, getting on for 5 weeks. As I say, it can be an agonising wait sometimes. What type of organisation are you? This strangely isn't mandatory, but we do require that information if possible, as to how your organisation or club is set up. If you're a charity or a company, we do make other checks, you know, on sort of Charity Commission and Companies House. In terms of an incorporated club or association, for the smaller clubs that Made by Sport are targeting, if you like, that's their main priority. We tend to see more in this, and sometimes community interest companies that are relatively new have got a lower income at the moment. So please put those in. If you're affiliated to a national body, please specify which. So that the sort of Birmingham Football Association or the National Football Association, the National Netball Association. That's again not a mandatory question, but it's useful if you can complete it. It doesn't jeopardise your chances of getting the fund if you're not. So if you're, you know, just you're not a sports club, you're just a community group that delivers sport, but you're not affiliated because you're not in any leagues or anything. It doesn't affect your chances, you know, it doesn't make you lower down the priority because you're not. Similarly, with this question here, asking if you've had any of these 3 funds before. Mandatory question again, paying up to 500 words. We don't need 500 words in there, you know, it's a yes, we had some, you know, tackling inequalities fund in such and such a date and how much. Again, if you have had that money or you haven't, it doesn't matter, it doesn't jeopardise or affect where you're seen within your application in terms of priority. So just, you know, put it down if you have. It doesn't mean we're not going to give them this money because they've recently had some from the Tackling Inequalities Fund. Well, I think the Made by Sport just wanted an overview of the kind of people that are applying or kind of clubs that are organisations that are applying. But it doesn't, you know, it won't give you higher or lower priority by being honest in that question. So please be honest in there. Self-explanatory, how many young people aged 5 to 25 are members of your club, how many over 26. These figures here are used when we was talking about the 10% priority earlier. You know, if you've got more adults than young people, it's important to indicate within your application and be clear within your application that this particular application is going to benefit 5 to 25-year-olds. It's only going to fund our youth football sessions on a Saturday morning, because that's the age that the funder wants to fund. So not interested in this age range. Again, how many volunteers or staff? Here, which of the following outcomes does your work with young people contribute to? Could be that I can't get the drop down to work for some reason. Maybe it's because I'm sharing the screen, but there is a drop down there, and it will include the 5 social outcomes that we talked about already. You know, improving mental health, reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, developing employability skills. So you do have to name one that your work will contribute to. But when you fill in some of the other parts of the form, mention actually, although we've said it's developing life skills, our project will improve mental health and address antisocial behaviour as well, to add weight to your application. I think this is more about their data analysis that they've funded, you know, to look at. The majority were funding this element, but your application can absolutely hit more than one of the outcomes that they're looking for, and it will certainly add weight to your application if you're doing more than one. So mention that in your application in a question further down that we'll look at. Do you work with groups that are traditionally underrepresented in sport? I've given some examples there, so you can sort of use one of those or another, and if it's another, obviously you need to state what the other is. Annual income of your club, so that's obviously the last 12 months of your annual income, how much you've made in the last 12 months. This is a question that we've fed back that we're not sure is 100% necessary, but at the moment they've still got it in. So roughly, you know, if you've got a £2,000 annual income, where does it roughly come from? I know one of you said earlier that you didn't know about funding, you know, it's a new thing to you. So yours might be mainly from memberships or subs, you know, if it's a sports club. You know, some people will put catering, you know, because they sell food at the football sessions, you know, and that helps towards bringing a revenue into the club. So yeah, if you can put a percentage, you know, it's 100% membership or fees, and break it down. As I say, we're hoping that question's taken out. What's projected expenditure for the coming year? Most of our applications ask for income and expenditure from the last 12 months, which is easier to, well, you know what you had coming in and going out usually, you know, when you've been recording that. A sort of a projected idea of how much you're going to spend next year is what they're interested in. Normally, you know, it can be similar to what you spent last year, or it may be more this year because you didn't spend that much last year because your club wasn't running due to the pandemic, for example. So just a rough idea of how much you think you'll be spending next year is to go in there. These two next questions, we've talked earlier about the supporting paperwork that you need to send. So you will have to send your safeguarding policy and your equal opportunities policy. And these two questions are related to both of those things. So within the safeguarding one, for example, I mean, the way it's worded, what are your safeguarding risks and what measures do you take to reduce them? It's looking for what we want to see in there is information that you know, volunteers undertake safeguarding training. Anybody that's going to be working directly with children are DBS checked. We undertake risk assessments if we're taking the kids in our own vehicles to, you know, a match, you know, an away game. All of those kind of things that you might not be included in your policy, but we can, you know, we can see more about your sort of understanding or attitude towards safeguarding can be put in that box there. We have had applications where people say, oh, and our safeguarding policy is reviewed annually by the board. And then when we look at your safeguarding policy, it hasn't been updated for a couple of years or something. So if you know, I think it's quite good because sometimes it prompts you to actually maybe review your safeguarding practice, or have a little look at, you know, your safeguarding policy and think, oh God, yeah, I think we need to review that. Similarly with equality, it's about when was it last reviewed, and self-explanatory, I think. Describe your organisation's approach to equality. So again, things that might be included in your policy or not included in your policy, you know, so how inclusive you are, you know, what the opportunities that you provide to a variety of different people with a variety of different needs. So make sure that you're being sort of open to all, really, within that question. That's what we see. Again, 500 words these boxes are. I don't think you needs to have a good chunk in there, but not 500 words is an awful lot, really, when we're reading them. So, you know, just to give us a feel for your attitude or your organisation's approach to equality and safeguarding, just complete a little bit more in those boxes in addition to submitting your policies. I can't see the chat thing why I've got this open, so has there been any questions, or has anybody got any questions? Now we're sort of about halfway through the form. No,
No, it's all okay at the moment. Thank you.
okay, great, thank you. Right, and details. Strangely, this isn't mandatory, but we absolutely need these details here, because we can't pay you if you don't, if you're successful with a grant, if you don't provide those. Although you're providing a bank statement, we do require the information in here, because you sort of can cross-reference that, and also our system pulls through from these boxes when we do our checks as to, you know, we're paying the right bank account in conjunction with the statement that you've submitted. So we do need that bit completed. Organisation size, again, that's a drop down, and it doesn't work, I think. I don't know if it's because I'm sharing my screen, but that will say up to 25, up to 50, up to 75, which will then highlight which priority, you know, you're in when I was talking about the different priorities earlier. Age range of the children and young people you work with. So although this project that you're applying for might be for your TOPS football, so, you know, sort of the 5-year-olds, 5 to 6-year-old football, your actual age range of young people that you work with generally might be 5, 25. So that's what we'd expect to see in there, not necessarily just for this project. Overall, what's the age range of the children and young people you work with? You're based in, again, that's the drop down, and it should include all of the areas within our region. These are the boxes now where we expect sort of more information. This is when you're starting to talk about the project you're applying for, or your organisation, what you do and how you do it, sort of information. This is the main bulk of your application, really. So this is where we'll get a feel of what you want the money for, what you've already done, you know, up to now, what difference it's going to make to the children and young people. These are these questions. They're worded very differently to how most of our other applications are worded. So that's why, we wanted to go through them to explain a little bit, not obvious straight away, what do we want you to put in these boxes. That's the reason for looking at the form today, really. So, organisational aims. This is your opportunity to show how your organisation uses sport for development to deliver wider social outcomes. It's a bit of a mouthful. Took us a while to sort of get our head around what that actually meant. So for you guys, you know, to look at what do we want in this box. Guys, please write a short case study. So we see in there, we do see case studies. It doesn't have to be a case study. You can answer the question more generically. So, you know, we use our football sessions to address antisocial behaviour, you know, within Nuneaton, you know, just thinking of Warwickshire. It's giving sort of an outline of why you do what you do and what the aims of your organisation is, really, because usually our question say something like, please describe the aims and objectives of your organisation. So what you do, and not necessarily just this project, it's more generally what you do on a day-to-day basis. So we deliver football sessions for the kids across North Warwickshire twice a week. We do
it's really, yeah, it's really the question is about, it's your opportunity to start singing about what you do in your community and the difference that you make, the experience that you bring. That this is the who, essentially, of the application. Who are you, and why is this the program for you? And in terms of the sorry, just going back to the case study earlier, certainly doesn't have to be 500 words, but we find that for most people, it's really quite easy to think of somebody that you've helped, or somebody that's just attended football sessions, but they've lost a couple of stone in weight, and that, you know, they're not being bullied at school anymore. These very simple stories are really helpful in particularly illuminating the Made by Sport applications for us. But I'm sure if all of you thought about it, you could come up with somebody, you know, that sticks in your head immediately, that would be the answer to that question. And as long as it fits a little bit into the developing life skills, building stronger communities, I mean, those are phrases that we use as funders. But it's about making changes, what might be, you know, long-term, lifelong changes to people's lives from the activities that you're carrying out.
Thanks,
intentionally or unintentionally.
I think Liz has explained that part, you know, when you just get to it. Thank you for chipping in. It's because it's worded so, it is exactly as Liz said, it's the who, it's what you do and how you do it, and case study. Yeah, there must be a kid that's come to one of your activities that you've seen transform, you know, for one of the reasons. Particularly, you know, we see a lot that particularly just around confidence, so that's improving their mental well-being, really, that they're just growing in confidence and developing life skills at the same time, because their confidence improves, they become more sociable with their teammates, you know, more able to communicate and all of those kind of things.
And the reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, just giving people somewhere to go that isn't hanging on a street corner, being vulnerable, being prey for others.
The next question here, this is again one that we've fed back, is it necessary? Because we've just talked about a case study and the difference you've made to people there, although, you know, that's normally just about one person. It does give you a flavour of the work that you're doing with children and young people. You know, if you've made that difference to the one person that you've maybe used as your case study, you know, that's transferable in terms of your sessions into the difference that you're making for the rest of the kids and that access your activities. So the next question here, where they're asking you to give examples of how you've helped people, it's a little bit repetitive, but you might just want to sort of expand. You've gone from one person there, expand in this box as to, you know, sort of other examples, or just widen this bit here. Put a little bit of information in there. As I said earlier, we'll contact you if we feel we need a little bit more, or it's strong enough as it is. One thing within this question here that we get asked, or I've had asked quite a few times really, is here, you may also want to tell us about the people involved in your project and why you are confident in their ability to make the project succeed. People have said, what's that mean? What, I don't get it. What does that mean? What it actually means is it's an opportunity to sell your organisation's staff or volunteers. So, you know, we know that the youth workers that deliver our youth sessions are local people. They're well connected with the kids in the area. That sort of gives weight, that they'll be able to engage people because they're already known. So that would help you to identify that you're confident in the ability to make the project succeed. You've got a good reputation, you're well known in the area, People come to you all the while asking when you're going to start new sessions because you've got a good track record of doing good stuff up to now. So that's what that sort of question means there. So how you know that you're confident that if you give us the money for this, we'll make a difference to kids in the area is because of all those things, sort of the examples I've just given, that you're local people, you've worked in the area for a long time, you're well connected, you've got other connections, particularly looking at this programme. We have people apply that say they've got a good relationship with the local police, so the local, the PCSO refers people to come to their sessions, just kids that are sort of hanging about a bit, and as Liz said earlier, to signpost them into something, that's a little bit positive to help focus their energies into something positive rather than getting embroiled into antisocial behaviour and those kind of things. So another opportunity to sell you as people, or the people within your club or organisation, your head coach, for example, and those kind of things. Again, it's 500 words. You don't need to fill that, but we do expect to see a good amount of information in these boxes. Here now is the project purpose. Please tell us why you're applying for funding. So this is what you want the money for. It asks about in relation to how the pandemic has affected your club or organisation. So we've seen applications again where the club's almost folded because they've had a year, maybe more than a year, where they haven't been able to run sessions, so lost out on subs for the 12 months. We see people that say usually, they have 1 or 2 fundraisers a year, a little community event or something where they raise extra money to buy new kit, for example, with the kids involved with the club sometimes lead on that as well, to buy themselves new kits and bibs and footballs that we get asked for. So all of those things stopped because of the pandemic. So that made us now that we haven't got any money and we might struggle to continue without a little bit of help. So mention that, but also, tell us about the project. So if you want to, for example, continue to deliver football on a Saturday, you need to tell us about that. We need the money because the pandemic, caused us to nearly go bankrupt. We nearly folded because of it. That isn't enough there. We do need that information, but a little bit more about, because if you was to just say the club lost out on 12 months worth of subs because of the pandemic, so did a lot of other organisations. So, we need to know what your club won't be able to continue to do if we don't help out with a bit of funding. Is that clear? I'm just thinking that, if you give us this money, we can continue to deliver football sessions every Saturday for children and young people. If you don't give us the money, we can't do that. So it's a little bit about what this funding will enable you to continue to do. That's what we need to see in that box. How the pandemic has affected you, but also how you'll be able to move forward with a little bit of support in terms of the money that you may get through this application. That's the main box really in terms of your project outline, is what sort of a normal forms ask for. Please describe the project that you want funds for. So we want to continue to deliver football on a Saturday for 5 to 11-year-olds for a couple of hours, to improve their mental well-being, to address developing life skills, and give it a few of examples as to why, how you do that. So developing life skills, because the kids have to communicate with each other, and the mental health is they're growing in confidence. So give a couple of examples within your sessions that help demonstrate that you're developing life skills or the mental health. To be fair, I think the majority of applications, haven't seen, I don't know about you, Liz, but I haven't seen many that's been developing employability. The majority have been around life skills. Building strong communities has been quite prevalent as well, you know, because it's getting sort of communities together, kids mixing with kids that they might not mix with at school, you know, when they go to football on a Saturday, all of those sort of things. Most are probably the developing life skills, improving mental health and reducing crime and antisocial behaviour are probably the strongest three that we're seeing. If you are developing employability skills at the same time as delivering your sports activities, let us know about those, because if we haven't seen many, so I know the panel will be keen to fund those too. Is that clear? I can't see any chat questions.
Yeah, so I think for me, yeah, I think it's just a case of really. So what to a Word document and sitting there and writing it and then reviewing it, then writing it, reviewing it, and writing it. So yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's just going to take time, I think.
Yeah, good. I'm glad it's straightforward. I don't think it's straightforward, but hopefully we've explained it well. It made it clearer. I think you've just said
Well, I've done worse. So
right, okay. Yeah, I think you've just raised a really good point now, Andy, around doing it on a Word document. We have people that, because this is a live document, that's why I'm not sort of messing about with it too much. You fill it in online. You can save it at any point. We get people phoning us panicking that they've lost their application, and we can sort of get behind the scenes and find it for them and say, you haven't lost it, here's the link. But to do it on a Word document, I think it's a really good idea. That, you know, it can allow you to tinker with it and then copy and paste it into the boxes is a really good suggestion. So yeah, thank you for saying that, Andy, because I think it is a useful. You'll feel it's safer,
yeah,
you know, than doing it live. You don't want to lose your work.
That's actually one of our top
Um,
tips, isn't it, Lou? And
Yeah.
the other thing we say is, when you've done it, give it to somebody else to read who's outside your organisation and see if it makes sense to them. Your responses make sense to them, and that's really helpful, because they'll be probably looking at it in a similar way to we are, because we don't know every single organisation that applies, and we don't know the detail of what they do. So if somebody outside reads that they can make sure that, like we were talking earlier about really singing about yourself and your expertise and everything else, they can make sure that that's coming through in the application.
Yeah, I think that by my own admittance, I'm not a sports person. I'm not, you know, it's not sort of my bag. So keep it as simple as possible if you want me to understand it. But that's the same with any application, really. We see applications. I think people think that they need to. We do want you, when you're selling your organisation, we do want you to impress us in terms of your ability to engage children and young people, to sell what you do really well. But I'm not impressed by jargon that I don't understand, you know, and if I've got to Google things because I don't understand what that actually means. We've had applications from specialist sports clubs. I think football's probably one of my stronger ones to understand. But you know, if you're talking about gymnastics and they're mentioning different things, that if us as assessors don't understand it, it's hard to translate it for the panel, really. So keeping it as simple as possible. And as Liz said, give it to somebody that knows, involved with your club or organisation, knows nothing about what you do. And if they understand it, there's a good chance that the assessor and the panel will understand it as well, what you want to achieve. I think people can get, when you're actually involved with the club or organisation and the work that you do, you can get carried away with the passion of it and not tell us the basic stuff. So it's things like how many kids do you engage at each session? How long does each session last? How often do the sessions run each week? It's those kind of things that the facts really, and people can get carried away with the enthusiasm and the passion of the project because you love it and you want to make a difference to the kids and get the money to help them. Sometimes it's take a step back and as Liz said, get somebody else to read it who knows nothing about the work that you do, and if they get it, then there's a good chance that we'll get it as well. But if we don't we'll drop you an email or give you a call to unpick any of the that we may need in your application. A couple of chats. Okay, Andy, no worries. I think we're coming towards the end of the form anyway, so thank you.
Yes. Sorry. Thank you.
Okay, take care. Yeah, now, so how much are you applying for? As I say, it's up to £2,021. Here, it'll ask you what you want the funds for. So direct project costs, including equipment and kit. Our panel ask every time for a breakdown of budget there. So if you want, your direct project costs might be venue hire every Saturday, you'd have to say every Saturday, but once a week for 2 hours, £50 times 10 weeks is £500. So we need to see that. And if you want equipment and kit, what equipment and kit do you want? And how much is it? So, bibs at £5 each times 10, £50. If you don't include that, we will be contacting you to ask for that. And again, if it's a tight deadline for the next panel, you might miss that panel by not including, we might not have time to get the information from you before the panel meets. So if you can give a clearer breakdown of the money that you are applying for when you apply, it will speed up your application, getting assessed and getting on the table for panel to review and getting you the money really. So yeah, if you can provide a breakdown of costs there, we will ask for it. So if you do it when you apply, it's much better than us having to contact you afterwards. How many people aged 5 to 25 take part in the project you're applying for? Again, you might work with all of that age range, but this particular project is just looking at the younger people's football on a Saturday. So that's, that might be 30, even though you've got 100 children and young people 5 to 25 involved, there might only be 30 that for this specific project that you want the funds for. Primary beneficiary, again, this is a drop down. It includes a host of different things, children and young people is what we would expect to see there because of the nature of the fund. It also includes local residents, men, women, people with mental health difficulties. There's quite a few there, but you need to pick your primary one. And more often than not, that's children and young people that we see there, purely because of the nature of the fund. That's their target audience, really. Ethnicity, again, your primary ethnic group. There's all ethnicities that you can tick still at the moment. But if you've got sort of a main ethnic group that you will engage through your project, we want to see that there. We talked earlier about being used towards other grants or other income. If you plan to, we want to see more information in there. It's a mandatory field, so even if it's a no, say no, because you won't be able to submit your form without putting something in that box. So it might be £2,021 is all you're applying for, a piece of work with children and young people. It's not being used for a wider project. You do need to put something in that box in order to submit it. Similarly with this box here, so I think that we would expect to see something in there around the sustainability. So again, going back to sort of the project outline question, how has the pandemic affected you? This is your opportunity to say, if you give us this money, it's going to sustain us for another 12 months. Because once the kids start coming regularly, the subs will help us self-sustain after that. But at the moment, we just need a bit of support to get us through the next 6 months, for example. So how this fund, if you're successful, will be used to help you keep going, really. Just a bit of information in there. And that's it. that's the form. I say that's it in a sarcastic tone because I do appreciate it's a very long form. This is why we go through it today, to try and give you some pointers, because we've had feedback that it's so daunting. It's quite a long form, but when a little bit of insight into what we expect to see, and Andy giving that good tip earlier about starting on a Word document sometimes and copying it and pasting it just before you submit is useful, because people do panic about unfortunately losing their application. So I will say, if you do think that you've lost your application, don't start again before contacting us, because 9 times out of 10 we can find it by going behind the scenes, you know, and send you a link to get back into your form. So, you know, we have had people where they've filled in another form, bless them, because they've lost their original one that was almost completed. So yeah, don't start a new one if you think you've lost it without giving us a shout first to try and find it for you.
Lou,
Yeah.
what requirements are there for reporting after? So if we were successful and we get the grant, I see that you've got to do a questionnaire or something by.
Yes, there will be. Yeah, there were. Have you applied before to us?
No, sorry.
Right. Okay. So with most funders, I think we've only got one programme that doesn't require any formal monitoring. That's Harry Payne Fund. But overall, there will be a requirement for you to submit what we would call an end of grant form.
Mm-hmm.
So when you, if you're awarded, when we go through sort of the post-panel process, as we call it, where we're sending you an email and allocating the funds that you've been successful to, it will automatically generate an end of grant form that you will get an automatic email from. So let's say your project is due to end in December. We normally put the monitoring for January to give you a month to get everything together. So everything that you put on this form, when people do their end of grant monitoring, we recommend that they have their application form open as well, because it should replicate that, particularly, and I'm sure Liz will agree, we get an awful lot of phone calls about the finance section. Completed all the rest, the difference they've made to kids, how many kids they've engaged. Finance question every single time seems to stop you submitting it. It's a mandatory field, and if you've got £1 out, it won't let you submit. So if you've been awarded £2,021, just thinking of this programme, your budget section should absolutely add up to £2,021. If it doesn't, you won't be able to submit. We do get a lot of questions about that. But to answer your question, yes, you will be expected to report back on the funds that you've been allocated. I think the questionnaire or the survey, as it's been worded, I think that's, again, as a national programme, it's come from Made by Sport. But my understanding is it will be like our normal monitoring. They've just called it something different. So they will want some feedback as to the difference that what you've spent the money on and the difference that you've made. Is that explained?
Yeah, and again, if we don't spend all the money, because it came in less, do we return it to you?
Again, contact us to discuss that, because we don't always want the money back. If there's absolutely no way that you can spend it, for example, clubs have folded. We folded now. We can't spend it. But if you've put down, I'm using football, but bibs and balls at £5 each, and they come in at £4.50, you're going to come in a couple of £100 underneath. Like you say, you're getting a better deal, which we want people to get a better deal. We've got a couple of £100 left.
Yeah.
If you contact us and say, if we haven't spent it all, we've got a couple of £100 left, but we're planning to do an extra session with the kids, can we put it towards room hire for 2 more sessions, or pitch hire? If we think it's a reasonable suggestion, a reasonable proposal, we'd ask for maybe a little bit more breakdown on budget. Normally we would accept that if we think it's reasonable, and it's still, the project that you're delivering. If somebody was to apply, email us and say, we want to spend it on something totally different, thinking of generally they've done some work with kids and they want to spend it on the older people's coffee morning, that may not be acceptable, because it's not benefiting the original beneficiaries that the grant was awarded for. But yeah, we don't want the money back if you can spend it to still continue to do good, but you must contact us. And also,
so the important thing is, we talked about the programme aims right at the very top of the form, you know, using sport as a tool to effect social change. And the question is, that money that you've got, are you still going to be using it for those aims? And if you can show that you are, then that's absolutely fine. And I go as far to say we never want the money back, because it will just go into a pot somewhere, it'll never be used. So if you know that you're going to be having money left over, things have come in cheaply, don't leave it until the end of the grant, until you get the form. Get in touch with us then and say, this is the situation, I want to use it for this, how would that be?
And yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
we've had people where when they've submitted their end of grant, they've spent the money differently, and we have to query that with them. So you shouldn't spend the money on different things without checking with us first. That's sort of mentioned within our terms and conditions. As Liz has said, we don't normally want the money back if you're going to continue to do good work with it for the beneficiaries that you've applied for. But we do expect that you sort of run it past us before you make changes to your original budget. But normally it's okay. I'm just going to stop sharing that one. Just got one more. Right. Can you see a sort of a Word document?
Yes.
Yeah, great. This I'm not expecting, I mean, I can send this to Leonie to share with people who have attended rather than read it through, but these are applications that we've received. And when we've been talking about the intentional use and the unintentional use, some of the examples I've given earlier, these are the two ways that both of these were funded, so they were both successful, even though they addressed the wider social outcomes in a different way, but they were both funded. As I say, I will send it to Leonie so she can send it out. But this one, in short, is a boxing club. They worked, I said earlier, you know, people have worked with the police, they worked with local schools, the police and other groups who identify vulnerable young people that need a hand in finding a positive way in their lives. And they've engaged them in the boxing just because they've been hanging around in the park, usually up to no good. They've put in their application. So it's steering them into some positive activity to address. In this example, I think they put crime and antisocial behaviour as their main outcome, but again, the mental health and developing life skills was included as well. So they intentionally used their boxing. They didn't start off that way in 2011, but over time they've realised that it's about making a difference to kids' well-being rather than them becoming the next heavyweight boxer. You know, so that was the intentional use of sport. This one, a football club. So their main drive is football. So they want kids to join, to be part of a team, to progress in the league, to play games at home and away, all of the things that football clubs do. So their main drive is to improve football and get better in the particular league that they're part of. But by extension, they've given a good example here of, you know, within their case study, of a girl who had confidence issues. So she wanted to play football and she was part of the mixed team, taking part in a league and playing competitively, really. But by extension, unintentionally, they've improved his confidence and mental well-being. So those are the two different sort of examples of applications we've received that have both been funded just because of the difference sport has made to the wider social outcomes, either with a focus on improving wider social outcomes or with not a direct focus. Those are just a couple of examples. As I say, I'll send them to Leonie so you can have a look. These are written by other people, so, you know, hence usually up to no good, you know, sort of, you know, it's just saying it how it is, really, isn't it? You know, if they're hanging around and they're getting up to no good, you know, the kids that have engaged them in boxing, to give them something positive to do rather than getting up to no good. Those were just a couple of examples. Any questions? Stuff in the chat that's I think Elaine's promoting some of the other activities that you've got going on. That's what's in the chat at the moment.
Yeah, I can't see any more questions for you in the chat there, Lou or Liz. So thank you ever so much for your comprehensive explanation of the application process for this fund. Really appreciate it, and your presentation. Are you happy for me to send the presentation out as well with the other supplementary information? Okay, so I'll send out all of the information and the recording on Friday.